Governor, thank you very much for coming as always. And let's start with some good news. We had the chance to talk with Ken Casey yesterday in front of me in the Dropkick Murphys, who just had Bruce Springsteen singing behind him, as a backup singer.
Yeah, awesome.
But you and Ken are in agreement about this crackdown on concert resale tickets. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Oh, God. I love Ken Casey, too. Love Dropkick Murphys, loves his advocacy. So let me tell you about what I'm proposing. Look, I want everybody to have access or an opportunity, a fair opportunity to buy tickets. You want to. We've got great performers coming to town. When you think about all the concerts,
Can I interrupt 1 second, please?
Sure.
By the way, if you have a point you want to make with the governor, feel free to ask a question, but try not to disrupt it for everybody else. I'm sorry, Governor.
Yeah,
Take it away.
Okay, so what Ken's about, what I'm about, what Noah Connor is just like, let's make it fair for people to actually buy tickets. It's so frustrating when, like the artist who you really want to see or your kids want to see, and you've saved all this money to be able to go buy some tickets, and you go online and you can't get tickets, right? I mean, and they put you in a queue and, they're never available. And then all of a sudden you go online and you see with the resellers, there are tickets available, only they cost like 10 times as much as the face value. So what I'm saying is that, when it comes to Massachusetts, and we've got great venues here, we've got great artists coming through here, let's rein in the resellers who are gouging the heck out of us. And so I put forward legislation. Let's limit, the resale value cap to 10%. Let's limit the service fees that get tagged on to 10%. And let's give everybody, or more people, an opportunity to buy tickets, to take their kids, their friends, themselves, to go see the artists that they love. And, that's what the artists want, too. I mean, seeing a show shouldn't just be something for the elite and wealthy, right?
Right.
And, I think it was great having Noah Khan in town. It sort of, it helped inspire me to file this legislation because those tickets were so hard to come by. And he's been a terrific, not only is a great advocate on mental health and so many things and a fantastic artist, but he's really been speaking out about this issue for a long time, and it's a matter of fairness.
Did you go to Fenway to see him?
I did.
Did you have to pay for the tickets?
I did.
Did you pay a markup?
Yeah. A little bit, but
not.
I mean, I know a lot of people that paid huge markups.
Yeah.
I also know here's
So do
something also that my legislation would do. It would ban ghost tickets. Okay, we saw this during the World Cup. You sometimes see it during concerts where you go online, you buy tickets, you show up at the venue, and the tickets actually aren't transferred to you.
Worst experience
because
in the
it
world.
turns out these were all speculative tickets or ghost tickets. And it's, to me, as a former AG, it's total fraud, and people are being taken advantage of, and, so devastating. So it would ban ghost ticketing as well as limiting, what resellers can do.
So before we get to the calls, speaking of legislation, there are new rules in the legislature. As of last year, when they recess, or whatever the verb is, on July 31st, in the old days, for that 5-month vacation, they don't like it being called a vacation, there needed to be unanimity for anything to pass. Now, if a bill is in conference committee, they can continue with the normal process. By my reading, and I could be wrong on some of these, and obviously you'll correct me, some major things are not in conference committee yet and could die tomorrow night. Primary care bill, a farm bill, an AI being used in campaign ads, the abortion thing we discussed with a doctor and the advocate the other day after 24 weeks, public records laws. What are the prospects of those things, or anything else you care about a lot, making it by Friday night?
I think there are a lot of things that did get done this year. There's a lot of things that I want to see come to my desk. I think that, to me, top of mind is getting that PROTECT Act, which is the bill. I filed a bill to take additional actions to protect our residents from ICE. So I hope that gets to my desk this week. We've got in conference right now an energy bill. We just got word that utilities are going to look to increase rates once again. People can't afford it. It's why I'm fighting utility rate increases. People cannot afford it. It's also why it's really important that the energy bill I filed get to my desk. This is a bill that would save us upwards of $13 billion over the next few years. It does a lot of things. It makes energy cheaper. It forces the utilities to buy electricity at the lowest cost. And it does a lot of things to bring down something that a lot of people and businesses in Massachusetts and across the Northeast are struggling with, which is the high cost of energy. The other thing that I'd like to see is a great jobs bill, construction jobs. This creates 20,000 construction jobs to complete, and do renovations at our college campuses, our public university campuses. There's also legislation, that I've got out there on the ticket resellers that I talked about. I filed a bill on social media, actually, because protecting the health of all of us, the mental health especially of our young people, is really important. So, there's a lot of stuff pending, and I'm anxious to see it get to my desk. But super, super important are the things I mentioned. The last thing I'll mention is this. It is something I filed a year ago. It's called the DRIVE Act. And this is money that says we're going to fund as a state. We're going to fund as a state, and we're going to look to attract, some private dollars as well to fund science and research. Remember the devastating cuts that Trump did to NIH, to NOAA, to National Science Foundation? That has a really bad effect on Massachusetts, because 1 in 10 R&D jobs are in Massachusetts. You think about all the science, we think about life sciences, what comes out of our research institutions and hospitals. People down the street who are in labs discovering cures and treatments that will save our loved ones and, have made such a difference around the world. That's been cut. And, as a result, people's outcomes globally will suffer, but also our economy suffers. So that's something I really want to see funded. It's super important for Massachusetts.
Very quick follow-ups, because you raised a bunch of things. When you're talking about the list of questions, I don't think you included the legislation we discussed the other day with advocates and an OBGYN doctor, the thing that would change the rules about abortions after 24 weeks, no longer with these 4 exceptions, I think, but leave it to, quote, the professional judgment of physicians after 24 weeks. Do you support that bill?
I do, and I'll tell you why. I know of stories of too many women who've had to travel outside of Massachusetts to receive the care that they need. I know of a woman who's, in utero, her child suffered a catastrophic stroke. I know another one, I think it was at 33 weeks. At 31 weeks, I know of another woman who also had a situation where, there was a devastating thing that happened in utero, and the child, had no longer any brain growth, right? And these are moms, by the way, who had already built nurseries, had already planned to welcome their new baby in, and then, sadly, these things happen. But unlike other states, in Massachusetts, if that happens to you, you're not allowed to go and work with your doctor and your provider to get the care that you need, and you have to travel outside of Massachusetts. You hear of women spending up to $10,000 traveling 500 miles just to go somewhere else. And I think people are surprised. I talked to a doctor in Maryland who said, I'm used to seeing patients from Texas and Louisiana. I'm not used to seeing people from Massachusetts, though. And so we've done a lot here to protect women's access to the health care and the reproductive health care that they need. And obviously this is a situation that no one wants. Devastating, right? Devastating for parents. But if that happens, and when that happens, I want to make sure that women have access to the right health care, the health care that they need. So that's why I support it.
One last follow-up before we get to the callers is...
As I support, the other measures we've taken to protect abortion providers and patients generally in our state. And, it's why I stocked up on mifepristone at the start of my administration, because, abortion rights generally are so under attack in this country. 1 in 3 women live in a state without access to abortion care, and this has devastating outcomes for these women.
You mentioned the PROTECT Act on your list of things you hope happen. You've, I think, resisted through time referring to Massachusetts as a sanctuary state. Would we not be a sanctuary state if the PROTECT Act were to pass?
No, look, what the Trump administration has done and continues to do is to use ICE to attack our people. I mean, ICE is acting in a totally rogue way. They're not subject to the normal rules of engagement. They're not a law enforcement agency. It turns out we've seen incident after incident. They are hiring people who never, ever would have been hired. Like if these guys had applied to any one of our, not just law enforcement agencies, but a state agency, they wouldn't have been hired. And obviously they're not qualified, they're not trained, and people are continuing to die across this country. It is shameful what Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and this whole ICE operation continues to do. I've spoken out about it. It really bothers me, especially as someone who put bad people away, remember. You know, I used to work with the feds and prosecute drug traffickers and human traffickers. I know something about, you know, how federal agencies are supposed to act. And I also know that what we've seen over the last 18 months is we've seen moms and dads ripped away from their families, ripped away from their kids. We've seen hardworking folks. The other day in Everett, you know, I mean, it's happening across this country still, that hardworking, tax-paying folks, many of whom have been here for a long, long time, contributing to our communities and to our economy, and, you know, no criminal records are now being picked up, housed in, you know, what seem to be really deplorable situations. And what is it doing to them? What is it doing to their families? So look, it's why I took executive action long ago. I think I filed, you know, and signed the strongest executive action of any governor in the country in terms of ICE, banning them from state properties, banning any more detention centers, and also this legislation that says, ICE, you got to stay out of. You cannot be in hospitals, daycares, schools, courthouses, places where people, regular people, we need to go every day. And it sickens me that right now in Massachusetts and around this country, because I talk to other governors, you know, we've got people, because of ICE, who are afraid to send their kids to school, afraid to go to work, afraid to just go out and shop. It's been absolutely devastating. So that's what the PROTECT Act does. It's about protecting our residents, protecting our communities in the face of, you know, just unbelievable, unconstitutional, and I think un-American actions out of the Trump administration on immigration generally. I mean, the other thing that I spoke out about this week is TPS. For folks who may not know, temporary protected status is something that the federal government gave as a designation to people who were fleeing their own country because of earthquakes, violence, real serious suffering. And, you know, the U.S., recognizing that, gave people this TPS status. Some have had it for decades, and they're here working as they are going through the standard immigration process. The Trump administration decided to rip the rug out from under these people. That leaves, just with respect to our Haitian population in Massachusetts, these are folks who are living here, working here, some since as long as 2010. Now, all of a sudden, the U.S. is saying, you are no longer here legally, you are no longer able to work. Now, Mike DeWine, he's the Republican governor from Ohio. He's spoken out about this. He has a larger TPS population, and, you know, he talks about how devastating it will be to their communities, to their economy. And both of us have said to the Trump administration that you need to change course on this. We've also said to Congress, you need to act to correct this right now. In Massachusetts alone, you know, understand that these are people, our TPS holders are probably the people, if you go into a hospital today, they're taking care of patients, they're taking care of your loved ones in a nursing home. Oftentimes, they're your PCAs working in home health care. So imagine it's devastating for these TPS holders and their little kids who they're trying to feed and support. What's going to happen to them, their families? And what's going to happen to all the families and people in Massachusetts who rely and have relied for years, for decades, on their work?
And by the way,
it's
we
just
should
another
add,
example of how wrong this Trump administration has been on so many things. I talk about energy. I mean, I forgot to mention, you know, the person who's driving up our energy costs more than anyone is Donald Trump. What he's doing not only in the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz, you know, but also shutting down American energy independence here. What am I talking about? He tried to shut down our wind, our solar, you know, things that we do here in Massachusetts that actually are sources that are independent. You know, we're not subject to whatever's going on in a foreign country. So, you know, he's doing so much harm across so many fronts, and, you know, it's why November in this election really matters.
Aren't we one of the states, by the way, that was disclosed the other day that was denied clean energy money because the state voted for Kamala Harris?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happening under the Trump administration. You know, it's unbelievable. He just denied FEMA funds to a bunch of states. FEMA funds, you know, in the wake of disaster. You know, usually the federal government is supposed to be there to make sure that they're supporting states. They don't always come through with the money. But what they don't do is pick and choose and say, oh, your voters didn't support Donald Trump, so we're not going to give you money. That's what Donald Trump is doing.
Let's go to the calls, 877-301-8970. Heather, you're from Situate. Thank you for calling.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
Governor Healey, right now we pay huge amounts to profit-making health insurance companies for our health coverage. Everyone watched costs go through the roof this current year. I saw that your administration just approved a 10% increase for next year. And what this functions as is essentially a regressive tax. The less you make, the higher percentage of your income you pay for health insurance. And it doesn't have to be that way. My question for you, Governor, is how can you keep supporting this rapaciously profitable private health insurance system that makes its money by denying us care, that penalizes workers and lower and moderate income earners, when there is a much more equitable, efficient, fairer system, a Medicare for all single-payer system that would provide much-needed financial relief to Massachusetts taxpayers, to employers, to self-employed and gig
Heather,
workers?
we got it, Heather. Let the governor answer.
Yeah.
Heather, thank you much
Heather,
for your
I'm with
call.
you. I'm with you. You know, I support that model. I support a universal healthcare model. It's not the model that we have in this country. What I have been doing, though, Heather, for you and for others across the state is trying to hold the line as best I can on any rate increases, as well as finding ways to cut. You know, I'm the first governor in Massachusetts to cap copays, to cap deductibles, to get rid of prior authorizations. I did that a few months ago. I'm working very closely with our insurance commissioner to deny and cap rates as best we can. And I've actually, if you look back, been pretty hard on that. And, you know, we've got, filings before us now. We're going to continue to be really hard on that. But, you know, the system's broken, right? This is what it goes down to. I don't know about you, but it's so hard to get a primary care appointment. It's so hard to get, you know, a mental health therapist, or at least one that you don't have to pay privately for. And part of what we got to do in this state is incent and grow more primary care providers and mental health providers. That's what I've been trying to do the last 3.5 years. Is what we got to continue to do. You know, force more spending in primary care, force more spending in behavioral health, and yeah, do everything we can to, you know, take any bloat, take any excess, you know, profits out of the entire healthcare system. Right now, I've got a healthcare affordability working group. They will be coming to me shortly. I set this up, hadn't been done before. And I said, get back to me with some short and medium and long-term recommendations on things that we can do in Massachusetts, because I can't wait for DC. DC's not going to correct this, so I should get the first set of recommendations very shortly. You know, along with housing costs, energy costs, healthcare is right there in terms of the things that are crushing families around this country, and certainly, you know, here in Massachusetts. And that's why I've made them a priority. I'm going to continue to. You know, I know how challenging this is.
Governor, I just want to be clear. So you are in favor of a Medicare for all, universal?
You know, I favor
healthcare
universal health care. You know, I do. But at the end of the day, it's not the system we have right now in this country. And so, you know,
But you'd favor at the national level if it were to happen?
Yeah, I think that model is successful and works, and we're one of the few Western countries that don't have that, right? That said, look, I'm a governor. He's got to work in real time. You know, what am I doing right now to get down costs, to cut rates, right? To make it. This is all about making sure that people have access to the health care that they need, and you don't have access if you can't afford it, or if there are no providers in your area, right, who are there to provide it. So these are the things that I'm, you know, really focused on right here. And what can I do as a governor of Massachusetts to lower people's costs? And I can tell you, you know, we are working very hard with some proposals that hopefully will make a difference. Is it going to take care of everything immediately? Heck no. But, you know, we have to start to take more aggressive action in this space, and that's what I'm doing.
Quinn in Framingham, you're on with the governor. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Quinn.
Hi, yes, thank you. I am simply against AI and would like Massachusetts to spearhead banning AI data centers and banning public employees from using AI. Is that something that you are interested in or working on, Governor?
Yeah, Quinn, why don't you talk a little bit for us about your concerns about AI?
I have so many. I think the number one is the environmental impact and the impact on all of our energy systems. I think those are the number one, but of course, also the concern of how it uses intellectual property of, you know, people that are actually producing things. Yeah.
So you should read, if you haven't, Cory Doctorow's book on the reverse centaur. It's kind of interesting about sort of AI, and, you know, if you haven't read that, I think I just read it last weekend. It was really good take, Quinn. I agree with you about the concerns about data centers, and it's why recently I said this. The state passed a law a while back that allowed tax incentives, tax exceptions for tax credits for data centers. A few weeks ago, I said, no, we're not doing that. I halted that, okay? The other thing I did, Quinn, is I said, any data center that's going to be built has to do the following, or it can't be built, okay? You got to account for energy needs. You can't suck energy off the grid at the expense of all of us. You've got to find a way to generate your own energy, and that's got to be clean energy that you're generating. And you've got to account for the environmental issues that you allude to, Quinn, including things like water. That's a big thing that we've seen with data centers around the country. So I think that's the framework, that we've got to think about when it comes to data centers. And I know there's a lot of concern about AI. I will say I think AI is here. We probably all have somehow touched AI today, whether you know it or not. Just about anybody with a phone or a device is getting something that is using an AI application. But it's about who AI is affecting, not as much as what it does. It's about who it's affecting. What's the workforce that it's affecting? Who's benefiting? Who's making money from this? And who isn't? And these are really serious questions that we've got to grapple with, I think, as a society, not just as a state. Do I think that AI can be used effectively and as a force for good? I do, actually. I think there are ways that we've seen AI deployed in labs that actually speed up experiments and, will help bring online more quickly new cures and treatments. It's something that we have used in state government, and, it's helped we've worked with employees. See, that's the difference. You got to work with workers. You got to work with a workforce and employees and have them design and decide how AI should be used. And we used it in a few of our agencies where, now people don't have to look through manually 900 pages in a permitting guidebook or rule book, and instead can, use AI to more quickly get at that and then verify it, right? That's something that actually employees designed. So, that's a little bit of, my perspective, Quinn, on AI. These are all important issues that we grapple with, not just as states, but as a country right now.
A couple of people have texted while you answering that question from Quinn.
I'm sure it's a hot. AI and data centers. They're super hot topics right now, and that's why, especially around data centers, I wanted to be out really clear with what I think should be a national framework on data centers. So the things that you have to account for when it comes to data centers.
The two people I see at the top, both from Lowell, said. You seem to be saying that if a large data center like the one we see in Lowell complies with, quote, environmental and grid requirements, she'd let it go forward because residents here are living under a constant hum, complaining daily about quality of life issues. What do you say to them?
Well, I think that's a comment about a data center that's already constructed and in operation. In fact, we've got a number of data centers that have been in operation for a while here in Massachusetts. But, concerns about noise, air quality, all of that. Again, these are environmental concerns that need to be accounted for with input from community.
Let's see if we can squeeze. We only have 2 minutes till a break. So Pam in the car, if you can be quick, we'll try to get a quick answer from the governor before the break. Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you, Governor Healey, for taking my call. Mine is not a hot topic, but I have a question about why you approved hunting on Sundays, bow hunting. We're big trail hunter walkers with our dogs, and we're always in safety orange from head to toe. Mm-hmm. And that's like the one day we can go out and not stress about us or our dogs.
We got it. Let's let the governor respond. We're short on time.
Pam, I'm glad you wrote. Look, I love to go walk in the woods with our dog, and I understand. That's super important that people here in Massachusetts are able to do that. Here's what I think, Pam. Though, we're one of only 2 states that bans Sunday hunting, and there are a lot of states with trails and recreational spaces, and I think that there is a way for certainly hunters to act responsibly and make sure that people are safe. We see that happening in other states. I think it should happen here. The other reason, Pam, I did it is because you got people who are busting their butts, working hard, 6 days a week. They've got to have a day of the week to be with family or take care of kids, and we've got to make it available to them that they have the option to also hunt on Sundays. Also, we've got issues around wildlife management. That's why my proposals around hunting were driven by and informed by the work of your Department of Fish and Wildlife, okay? So I think it's responsible, I think it's important, and I think it's something that should happen now. It's also a matter of food security, too. So that's the reasons, Pam.
Governor, I know you're a huge fan of intensive one-on-one tutoring, and you know about this program the federal government is offering money to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, other states too, any place, any state. You get a 100% federal tax credit of up to $1,700, which could be used for a lot of things, including tutoring. I know that the opponents are just saying it's going to be aimed toward private school tuitions, but it's also for a lot of other things, including that tutoring. So where are you on this?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a huge proponent of education funding. It's super important to support our public schools. I recently actually came forward with a proposal to give cities and towns another $100 million so that they don't have to lay off teachers, so that they don't have to lay off mental health providers in their schools or their guidance counselors. So, that's just something I think is super important. I'm proud that under my administration we've doubled the funding for education, not just K-12, but childcare, make community colleges free, and the like. So, that is super important to me. In terms of that federal law, we're taking a look at it. There's some more regulations coming out. I'm talking to all sides and hearing from them about, what the impact would be here.
So you have made,
but I'm always going to support our kids in education. No.
Because Mike Minogue was here the other day, one of the Republicans who wants to run against you, eviscerating you for your opposition. So as of the moment, you're undecided.
Is one of my potential Republican MAGA opponents representing something untrue about what I say? Yeah, that happens just about every day. But, to the public, I am, and in fact, both guys who might emerge, I don't know who's going to emerge from that Republican primary, but as you know, they're both big Trump-Vance guys, and among the things that Trump-Vance have done that are so devastating is they've cut special ed. Remember, they actually they got rid of the U.S. Department of Education, and they have harmed public education in such devastating ways. So, it's just one of the many differences in this race for governor and the kind of governor that this state is going to have. And, I'm a governor. I want to see Massachusetts as the place where you can raise a family, your kids can go to the best schools, you have access to the health care that you need, you live in a safe community, and you can afford all of it, all right? And that's what I offer, which frankly is a contrast to what Trump has been serving up the last 18 months, and a contrast to my opponents who, time after time have rubber stamped what Trump and Vance have been about, supported them, voted for them, and, you just go through the list, right? Trump, the guy that they support, he cut $1 trillion from health care in Massachusetts, in this country. And to go back to Heather's question about health care premiums, a reason why health care costs have not been helped at all, but have only gone up, and that state budgets are so strained and private employer budgets are so strained, is because the Trump administration is continuing to take money out of our pockets. And it's a decision for the people in Massachusetts. I know whose side I'm on. I'm actually not with Trump-Vance. I don't think that the Trump-Vance agenda has been good for Massachusetts or this country. My opponents stand with Trump. I stand with the people of Massachusetts, including on things like education.
Jim, I'm sorry,
and healthcare.
I was just going to say, by the way, the SNAP cuts and the cuts to Medicaid or Mass Health in Massachusetts, they have not come yet, or have they come?
Oh, yeah, they've come.
They've come.
Yeah, that's what people, every day, we're dealing with the impact of this as we go through workforce, and eligibility requirements. That's absolutely already had an effect, and it's going to be more devastating unless, we get a new Congress in who's going to restore some of this funding. But it's a super serious situation when it comes to health care, when it comes to so many things that the Trump administration has done to hurt Massachusetts. I talked about the science and research funding. I talked about ICE. These are all things, and just, example after example of things that are hurting Massachusetts. Literally, shutting down our wind farm, which right now is powering 300,000 homes and businesses, right, off the coast, built with, there's great jobs, and it's clean energy, and it's homegrown energy. And Trump has shut that down. We had to go to court, right, to keep that going. But, right now he's forcing companies to sell back their wind leases, their offshore wind leases, to oil companies, okay? And again, my Republican opponents have not spoken out against that. They have been totally down with the Trump agenda. That's not good for Massachusetts, you know? And it's just, it's why an election like this matters. The elections nationally across this country matter in November, and the election matters here in Massachusetts, because it's really about what's the vision of Massachusetts? What kind of Massachusetts do we want to be? You know, did you guys love the World Cup?
Yeah,
Everyone loved the Scots. That was
fun.
awesome, right?
It's fun.
We finally got all the beer back there. We replenished our beer supply. But, you know, one of the things I was so proud of is that I felt like Massachusetts was a great commercial for America. You know, people came from all over the world, so many countries. They hung together, they partied together, they celebrated together, they cheered for their teams. We had great watch parties all over the state. We had a super successful, it was safe, public transit was awesome, getting people back and forth to Gillette Stadium. But it was a great show, I think, of Massachusetts and who we are. And I was so proud of that. Proud of, you know, celebrating Massachusetts 250. Go back and look at the video of our drone show. If you didn't see that, it was super cool to see Paul Revere on his horse and, you know, the whole bit up in the sky. And then tall ships. You know, so poignant to see tall ships return to Boston Harbor and, you know, to know our history here the last 250 years. So, you know, that's the kind of Massachusetts I want to live in. You know, that's the kind of place I think we are to the world. And, you know, that's something that's on the line. It's not to say we don't have problems. We do, right? We have challenges. And every day I'm working on building more homes, you know, so that we can lower housing costs, lower rents. I want young people in Massachusetts to be able to stay here. We're growing our economy. You know, what doesn't get talked about is the number of businesses that have come here over the last year, the number of jobs that we've grown, and industries that are innovative and important and, you know, consistent with, you know, places where we've invested, and that's super exciting. So, you know, I want that message to get through to people. We got to work on our challenges, but there's so much good in this state, and you know, we've got people should take a pride in that too.
Sutton at the library actually has a follow-up to a topic you mentioned a second ago. Sutton, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, long-time listener. Excited
Thanks.
to be here.
Thank you.
Governor, I am deeply disturbed, as I believe that you are too, that here in the Commonwealth, 40% of our neighbors couldn't reliably afford food in the past year. When we talk about an advertisement for America, that's not what that looks like to me, right? And in the midst of that affordability crisis, 200,000 of our neighbors lost SNAP, which we know is our most powerful tool against hunger. And these are people I love. They're our elders, they're our veterans, they're my kids' classmates, they're my neighbors. Mm-hmm. And of course, Trump has responsibility for that. But our SNAP caseload in Massachusetts is declining at twice the national rate. And our decline in children's SNAP participation is now about on par with Texas and Louisiana. And when residents are calling our state agency to get or maintain SNAP, as they're required to do, 70% of those calls are automatically cut off because DTA doesn't have enough workers, and the hardworking public servants in that office are overwhelmed. And this is a Massachusetts problem. It's not just a federal problem. And I'd love to hear how you'll commit to use the tools that you have and the power at your disposal to address what really is not only a policy crisis, but a moral crisis, and make SNAP strong for all of us here in Massachusetts.
Sutton, thanks for your question.
No, thanks for your
Appreciate
question, Sutton. And, you know, food insecurity is something that I care a lot about, and addressing it is something that I've always cared a lot about. You know, I actually put forward in my budget proposed funding for more caseworkers. I didn't get that from the legislature, so I'm trying to get more relief. You know, one of the things in Massachusetts is we've had a system for a long time that has, we want to make sure people are fed, and that's a really good and important thing. You know, it's one of the reasons, one of the first things I did was to make school breakfast and lunch free for our kids, right? Feeding families is so important. I think that we were, as I understand it, we have been, we did not implement right away some of the reforms that came from the federal government. So, you know, the numbers were higher than in some other states right now in terms of who was on. But I'll tell you this, you know, I'm looking every which way to see what we can do, to how we can feed people. I brought together Project Bread, GBL, the Greater Boston Food Bank, the Western Mass Food Bank, all the food banks, I rallied when SNAP was cut a year ago during the federal shutdown, rallied the business community, and we were able to raise, $7 million in a short amount of time to get resources out. So, I'm here to work with and partner with everyone on this issue. It is deeply distressing that, anyone in our state would go hungry and be hungry. But, I ask for people's continued support and what I'm trying to advocate for in terms of funding. And then, I know the teams are working hard there. I don't like to see any delays or calls not answered at all. But it also speaks to the volume right now, and why I'm so focused on affordability, because the needs have gone up, not just in Massachusetts, but around this country. And we have a federal administration that, it's making things worse. So there's even more burden on the system right now, more need out there.
Thanks for your question. Jim in Waltham, you're next with Governor Healey. Welcome to the show. Hi.
And Marjorie, good morning. And
Morning.
Governor, I've been trying to reach you for a year, since last August.
You got her right now.
So I've sent letters to you and to your home, and again, this is about my brother, who was a 30-year veteran of a firefighter in Waltham, and he got real sick. And I'll be very brief. He was sick. He was moved to Waltham. He needed to get to dialysis 3 days a week. We had to use the ride. Well, the problem with that is the ride would not cross 128. He had to go to Wellesley. So a 3.5-hour dialysis would take 8 hours, and he was in no shape for that. So, I try to reach your office, 10 to 15 calls, no response, letters, no response. No response. And I just would like you to call me, and we could talk what had happened to my brother. My brother had passed away. He was found in a hallway at dialysis. He got out of the ride. They put him in a hallway, and they found him there. He coded and died 2 weeks later. This man, for 30 years, provided help to the citizens of Waltham, but when it was time for him to get help, everybody turned their back on him. And so he's passed away, but I don't want this ever to happen to another family. So I've reached out to you. You probably know who I am. I've reached out and reached out. Would you call me back and we can talk about
Jim, don't hang up. We'll get the governor's response, but please don't hang up.
No, Jim, it's Jim?
Yeah, and pull your mic up just an inch if you would, Governor. Thank you.
Jim, that sounds horrific. That sounds horrible. I'm so sorry that you went through that your brother suffered in that way. What is your name and what is your brother's name? And if you want to leave a number.
My brother was Joe Bozak. He was a 30-year firefighter in Waltham. We were desperate. My 92-year-old mother is just taking it so bad. I actually sent a letter to your house in Arlington. Never a response. I would love to talk to you about what happened. And it was just devastating, and it should never have happened. I don't want it to happen to any other family member.
I appreciate that, Jim. And look, leave your, I won't make you do it online, but you can leave it with the producers here, and I'll give you a call today. I will say, anything that can be done to, I hear you. Something that happened, if there's things that could be done to do things differently, whether it's with a ride or anything else, I'd want to take a look at that and, see what we can do. So I'm very sorry, and I'm very sorry for your dear mom, too, the pain she's living with.
Jim, please don't hang up. We'll get your contact information. And for your information, in addition to the governor's commitment, the head of the T will be with us in early August. And we'll check in with the governor. If necessary, we'll bring it up with Phil Lang as well.
Yep.
Good luck to you, Jim. Stick around. Governor, when you were on with us after 8 years showing up as the Attorney General, first show as governor, I asked you the following question. Will you confirm you'll not claim exemption from public records laws as governor and support legislation that at least cuts back whatever exemptions the legislature and judiciary believe they have? Your answer was brief. It was yes and yes. The legislature is grappling with public records things. They're happy to have you covered, it appears, but not them. There's a question that's going to be on the November ballot, question 1, that would support making records held by the state legislature and the governor's office subject to public records laws with 2 exceptions. Are you going to vote yes on that?
Yeah, what are the 2 exceptions?
I
support that. I support public records.
Well, let me just say what they are. Documents related to the development of policy positions of legislators of the governor, communications between a legislator's office and their constituents concerning a constituent's access to government services.
Because that's a privacy issue?
Yeah, I assume. So you're a yes vote.
In fact, now I try to produce as many public records as I can, even though there is an exemption. The governor's office is not subject to the public records law, but as governor, I've tried to be as transparent as I can, and those sound like the right kind of exemptions.
Are you happy with what the legislature is doing or not doing around its own exemption from public record laws, or should they be
What have they
covering
been-
themselves? Well, I don't know what all the details are.
I
but
don't know all the details either. I don't know
Okay.
what the latest is.
Okay. How about, before we leave it, there are going to be 9 questions on the ballot. Collective bargaining for a public defender employees, state primary election issues, election day registration sponsored by the Secretary of State, a state revenue cap issue, natural resource conservation fund, single-family homes, this is to repeal the recreational marijuana law and firearms regulation as well. Do you have positions on any of the other 8 questions yet?
Not on all of them, and there are some that I've sort of taken a closer look at as a matter of priority. You mentioned one. There's a bill, Nature for All, and I support that. There's a ballot question, I should say.
Question 6.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know what number it is, but
Yeah.
what it does is it's no new taxes, okay? But what it does is it takes the use of an existing sales tax on your recreational vehicles, golf equipment, other sporting goods. We get taxed when we buy that stuff, and it proposes that we take a piece of that and that we use it to fund land and water protection, park and trail restoration, right? And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing in Massachusetts to be supporting those things, and we would be able to do it in a way that doesn't raise fees or taxes on anyone. So I think that's important. I also think we've got to continue the push on housing. Over the last 3.5 years, I have worked really hard to bring more homes online, and we made ADUs something you can do by right. We decreased permitting times at the state level over a year down to just 30 days. We've done all sorts of incentives, to make home construction work. We got rid of brokers' fees for renters, and we've got to continue to look at ways that we can build more homes here, because I want our young people to be able to afford apartments, be able to afford homes here. I've got a new program, $25,000 towards a home for a first-time home buyer. So, any efforts that increase housing. There's a proposal out there, YIGBY, yes, in my backyard, and it would allow something that, I support. Early on I did a survey. I asked the teams, I said, let's do a survey of state land. Maybe it's you've got abandoned state hospitals or courthouses that have been shut down that we're not using, and let's turn those over for housing development. Actually, the federal law that was just passed on housing does something like that. It creates a public land database. So, that's what we got to do. Similarly, there's a proposal out there that looks at land that, schools, that churches, religious institutions have that might be available for housing. I think any opportunity that we can take advantage of to build housing in the state, we've got to do it. We've got to do it because we've still got a shortage. I mean, I've made a dent. I came in at a time, housing crisis, we were short about 220,000 homes. I've cut into that, all right? We've brought online, we've got built or permitted or under construction 100,000 homes. So we just got to keep, pedal to the metal on that. And, I think that's super important for ballot questions, but also just for legislation generally, and also at the local level. Say yes to housing. Say yes to housing. It's good for the state.
Governor, the president, even though he votes by mail himself, is not a fan of mail-in voting, and he's back at the Supreme Court again trying to get them to do something about mail-in voting. So that brings us to a question that's upsetting a lot of people, a change in mail-in voting for this coming election, and just declaring national emergencies or having troops at the polls. What can we do here in Massachusetts to make sure that whatever he tries to do will not be effective here in the Commonwealth?
Well, we're going to keep mail-in voting. I mean, and I know the Secretary of State's office and local officials will run a safe and secure election here. Mail-in ballots, I think they go up pretty soon, actually, for the primaries.
You're saying because states run the elections?
Well, that's the thing. People got to know that across this country, it is your state and local officials who actually run elections. And, we have seen time and time again them do that well. And even when they've been screwed around with by Trump, you had public officials, think about Brad Raffensperger when he was asked to go find 11,000 votes, or think about other court cases where courts have held. Elections have been administered in fair and secure ways. Now, what do I think we're going to see? I think we're going to see all bets are off. we're going to see everything and anything thrown at us by the Trump administration. They will be sending DOJ monitors to Massachusetts and states around the country. They will be sending out federal agents to try to intimidate and keep voters from the polls. They're going to go try to steal ballot boxes. They're going to file cases ahead of, voting day to block people from voting. They're going to try to find ways to take people off the voter rolls. We just got to be prepared. Know this is coming, because this is a desperate president, a desperate man, a desperate narcissistic man who wants to do everything he can to retain power. And the only way he's going to do that with approval ratings that are absolutely in the tank, the lowest of any president in history, is by trying to rig the election. So let's see it coming. Let's make sure we support our local and state officials here and around the country. Let's also make sure that people are registered to vote. They know how to vote. They've got a plan to vote. And that we support mobilization. Because if people are afraid to get out and vote, we don't want them to be intimidated. So these are the things that we need to do here in Massachusetts and what we need to do around the country. But, unfortunately, we got just over 90 days to go to the election. So we are going to see, day by day, week by week, another ridiculous effort by Donald Trump to steal this election.
Couldn't the Supreme Court overrule Massachusetts on the mail-in voting?
On the mail-in voting?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not a constitutional scholar. I don't think so. And at this point,
Jim, you're a constitutional scholar.
Would you like to
weigh
look,
in?
we got 90 days to go, and let's focus on the task at hand. Let's do what we need to do here in Massachusetts in terms of getting people out to vote, getting people registered to vote. A lot's on the line, not just the federal seats, but we've got state races, we've got legislative races, we've got local races. And your vote is your power, and we've got to show up like never before, including people who feel like government, understandably, may have abandoned them. Who haven't seen the receipts, who don't see government working for them. We've got to get out there and talk about the things that I know that I do as a candidate. The things that I've delivered on, the things that I'm doing, my focus, which is on affordability every day and standing up to the abuses of this Trump administration, delivering more homes and housing, lowering healthcare costs, lowering your gas and electric bills, growing the economy, These are things that we need to continue to talk about and do and get people voting and get to the polls. Get to the polls.
Bob in Norwood, you're next. You're on with the governor. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Governor, thank you so much for establishing the Norwood Hospital Task Force for the reopening of Norwood Hospital. The recommendation from your task force is that the state take by eminent domain the property located at Norwood Hospital and to force a sale for an operator to reopen the hospital. And I was just wondering if you would support Senate Bill H553, which would do just that, force a sale by eminent domain, like was done in the case of St. Elizabeth, to reopen the hospital, which is going on 6 years now for closure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Look, I have a lot of sympathy for the folks in the Norwood area. Norwood Hospital was a great hospital. Unfortunately, it was a hospital that was run by that thief, Ralph De La Torre, and so it actually had a terrible flood, and it was closed down and under construction, and then all that stuff happened with Stewart, so it's still sitting there, mothballed essentially. I'd love to see it reopen. And I'm happy to support that legislation, which also I think says, though, you've got to find an operator. Like, you can't just take it over. You got to find a hospital system to actually run the hospital. That's not something government can do. So that's what we really, really need to see. But I sure hope we can get something back there, because the people of that area lack that hospital presence right now. And somebody who wants to make sure that healthcare is more available and accessible. I'd love to see that happen.
We talked to you before about congestion pricing, but you see more and more written about it and talked about it, and the mayor seems to be on board with this in Boston. What do you think?
Well, look, I think we've got to do everything we can to get more people using public transit. I'll say that. I mean, it relates to something I announced yesterday. We thought we'd try out this summer, during all the World Cup and everything else, that we'd make our commuter rail monthly passes half off, and we'd make Fridays free, and we'd make weekends, you could go if you had a pass and bring along a companion for just $1. And part of why I did that is because I wanted to see and try to incent more people to use public transit. The numbers were amazing. Ridership's way up, and that's a good thing. And so I said to the team, you know what, we're just going to continue this. So yesterday I announced, I actually took the commuter rail line in to North Station the other day, I announced that we are doing 50% off your monthly pass through the fall. We're doing, we've dropped the express bus fare from like $4.25 down to $1.70. We're doing automatic transfers, so you can, you buy your ticket and you can then use it to hop on a ferry or a subway or a bus. And for a 2-hour window, you don't have to, like, people would get on the subway or get on a bus, right? Go down to the grocery store, buy their groceries, and come back. It used to be you get charged both ways. Now, if you go and you've got a couple hours to do those errands and get back. So these are all things we need to do to get people off of the roads, to get them using public transit. Also, you've got to make public transit attractive, which is why I've invested so much through Phil Lang and the team in getting rid of those slow zones, in improving service, in creating a T and a commuter rail that people can rely on. Do we have more work to do? Yeah. But 3.5 years ago, the trains were on fire. So we're making some progress. We opened up a couple new commuter rail lines down to the South Coast. It's terrific. We opened up a new ferry loop in Boston Harbor that gets people, over from East Boston and over to the seaport and, over to Charlestown. So I think these kind of investments are important as we look at the traffic situation generally. And certainly, congestion pricing, is part of a conversation out there. I know that immediately and first and foremost, I've got to think about, what I can do to improve my own public transit system so that more people are not using our highways and are going to be relying on the commuter rail, the T, and our buses. We also made regional transit free, which I think is important. Sometimes people in Boston and Greater Boston are only focused on Greater Boston. And look, I represent the whole state, and it was important to me that we make buses free for people around the state because people need to be able to get to school, to community college, to their doctor's appointments, and to shop. And so that's also something we've seen huge ridership increases in, and that's something I'm proud of.
So before you go, only have 30 seconds. People always ask us, who's the guest you've never been able to get? And at the top of our list for both of us is the person who jumped out of the subway into the Mystic River.
Is that right?
Do you know who she is?
No, I mean, no.
So you really don't?
No.
You do?
No.
Oh.
But I can find her.
Can you find out?
I'll try to find her.
Okay,
yeah,
fine.
I hope she's
That would
Yeah,
make
she
us
just
really-
sort of disappeared.
Yeah,
She
and
did
I'll
a quick
give her a ride on the
breaststroke
Orange
across-
Line.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right here.
I'll give her my own showing card.
Governor
Lisa,
Healey,
I
it's
do.
good to see you. Thanks for your time.
All right, thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very
Thanks
much.
so much.